What happens when a beloved television icon walks onto a morning show expecting a friendly chat, only to find herself in the middle of an ambush that would leave audiences stunned and the entire studio in chaos? That's exactly what unfolded when Valerie Bertinelli appeared on Today with Jenna and Friends, and what started as light banter quickly descended into one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning television history. Before we dive into what went down, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment below telling me what you think about this whole situation. The segment began innocently enough. Jenna Bush Hager welcomed Valerie onto the set with her trademark warmth, thanking her for coming on the show. Valerie, known for her genuine personality and openness about her life journey, smiled and settled into her seat. The plan was simple: discuss her latest cookbook, her approach to wellness, and maybe touch on some lighthearted memories from her decades in Hollywood. But what nobody anticipated was how quickly the conversation would take a sharp turn. Jenna started with the basics, asking Valerie about her new recipes and her philosophy on cooking. Valerie lit up as she always does when talking about food, explaining how cooking had become therapy for her, especially during difficult times. She spoke about finding joy in simple ingredients and how sharing meals with loved ones had helped her navigate some of her darkest moments. The audience was engaged, nodding along, and everything seemed to be going exactly as planned. Then Hoda Kotb joined the conversation. Now, Hoda's presence on Today is usually a source of comfort and joy for guests. She has a reputation for being warm, empathetic, and skilled at making people feel at ease. But something was different this time. From the moment she sat down, there was a shift in energy that even viewers at home could feel through their screens. Hoda jumped in with what seemed like an innocent question about Valerie's weight loss journey. On the surface, it appeared to be a natural topic. Valerie had been open about her struggles with body image and her path to self-acceptance. But the way Hoda framed it felt off. She asked Valerie to talk about the specific numbers, the pounds lost, the dress sizes, the timeline. Valerie's smile faltered slightly, but she tried to redirect, explaining that she preferred to focus on health rather than numbers. Hoda didn't let it go. She pressed further, mentioning how inspiring it would be for viewers to hear the specifics, how women everywhere struggle with the same issues and want to know the details. Valerie's discomfort was becoming visible now. She shifted in her seat and took a breath before responding that her journey was deeply personal, and she had made a conscious choice not to focus on metrics that had caused her pain for so many years. Jenna seemed to sense the tension and tried to steer the conversation back to the cookbook, asking about a specific recipe. But before Valerie could answer, Hoda interjected again. This time, she brought up Valerie's past relationships. She mentioned Valerie's ex-husband by name and asked her to reflect on how that relationship had impacted her relationship with food and her body. The studio went silent. Valerie's face changed completely. The warmth that had been there moments ago vanished, replaced by a look of genuine hurt and confusion. She looked at Hoda and asked quietly why they were going down this road. She had come on the show to talk about cooking, about finding joy, about moving forward. She hadn't agreed to dissect her personal pain on national television. Hoda, seemingly oblivious to, or perhaps ignoring Valerie's discomfort, doubled down. She said that Valerie had been so open in her books and on social media about these topics, so surely she wouldn't mind discussing them now. She framed it as though Valerie owed the audience this level of vulnerability, as though her previous openness meant she had surrendered the right to set boundaries. Valerie's voice remained steady, but there was an edge to it now. She explained that there's a difference between choosing to share something on her own terms and being put on the spot during what was supposed to be a lighthearted morning show appearance. She said she was proud of the work she had done on herself, but that didn't mean every aspect of her healing was up for public consumption at any given moment. Jenna tried once more to redirect, suggesting they take a quick break, but Hoda wasn't finished. she brought up something that would prove to be the final straw. She mentioned a recent social media post where Valerie had shared a vulnerable moment, and she asked Valerie to elaborate on what she was feeling in that moment, to really dig deep into the emotions behind it. Valerie stared at Hoda for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her words were measured but firm. She said that she appreciated Hoda's interest, but this interview had become something she hadn't signed up for. She explained that she had boundaries, and those boundaries deserved to be respected, regardless of how much she had shared in other contexts. She pointed out that consent to share in one space doesn't equal consent to share in all spaces. The audience was completely silent now. The discomfort was palpable. Jenna's face showed clear concern, and she looked between Valerie and Hoda as though trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. But the damage was done. Valerie wasn't angry in an explosive way, but her disappointment was clear. She had come to this show as a guest, as a person promoting her work, and she felt ambushed. Hoda attempted to backtrack, saying she only asked because Valerie was such an inspiration and people wanted to hear from her. But Valerie shook her head. She said that inspiration doesn't require trauma exposition, that she could inspire people without being forced to relive painful moments for entertainment. The distinction was clear, and it landed heavily. What happened next would become the moment everyone talked about. Valerie stood up, not in a dramatic storm-off way, but with quiet dignity. She thanked Jenna for the invitation and told her she hoped they could connect again under different circumstances. Then she looked at Hoda and said simply that she wished her well, but she couldn't continue with this conversation. She removed her microphone, placed it gently on the chair, and walked off the set. The camera stayed on Jenna and Hoda for a moment, both looking stunned. Jenna's mouth was slightly open, clearly processing what had just happened. Hoda's expression was harder to read, somewhere between defensive and surprised. The production team quickly cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Social media exploded within minutes, with viewers sharing their shock and, overwhelmingly, their support for Valerie's decision to leave. When the show returned from commercial, Jenna addressed the situation alone. Hoda had apparently stepped away. Jenna, to her credit, handled it with grace. She acknowledged that the conversation had taken an unexpected turn and that everyone on the show had tremendous respect for Valerie. She didn't throw Hoda under the bus, but she also didn't pretend that what had happened was okay. She moved on to the next segment, but the energy was completely different for the rest of the show. Behind the scenes, according to sources close to the production, there was immediate fallout. Producers were scrambling to understand what had gone wrong and how to address it. The segment had been planned and approved, but clearly something had shifted in the execution. Questions were being asked about whether Hoda had gone off script, whether there had been miscommunication about what topics were on the table, and how this would impact the show's relationship with future guests. Valerie's walk-off wasn't just about that moment. It was about a larger conversation regarding how we treat people in the public eye. The assumption that because someone has been open about their struggles, they must always be willing to discuss them on demand. The idea that vulnerability is a one-time choice rather than an ongoing negotiation of boundaries. Valerie's decision to leave was a powerful statement about self-respect and the right to control one's own narrative. The conversation that led to Valerie's departure didn't happen in isolation. To understand why the moment hit so hard, we need to look at what was actually being said in those final minutes before she walked off. The dialogue revealed something deeper than just a disagreement between a host and a guest. It exposed a fundamental clash in how women's stories are told and who gets to control that narrative. After Hoda made the comment about Valerie's social media post, asking her to elaborate on her emotions, Valerie paused. You could see her weighing her options, deciding how to respond. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Hoda, I shared that post because I was ready to share it, in my own words, in my own time. That's very different from being asked to perform my pain for an audience. Hoda leaned forward, and her response would become one of the most debated parts of the entire exchange. But Valerie, you put it out there. You made it public. So why is it different when we want to have a conversation about it here? We're all friends here. This is a safe space. The term safe space hung in the air like a challenge. Valerie's expression shifted, and what she said next cut right to the heart of the issue. A safe space is one where I get to decide what I'm comfortable sharing. It's not safe if I'm being pushed to go deeper than I want to go. Friendship means respecting when someone says they'd rather not discuss something. Jenna nodded, clearly agreeing, and tried to interject. Of course, Val, we totally understand that. But Hoda wasn't ready to let it go. She had a point she wanted to make, and she was determined to make it. I think our viewers would disagree. They look up to you precisely because you're so open. You've built your brand on authenticity. You can't pick and choose when you want to be authentic. That statement, the idea that Valerie couldn't pick and choose, was the turning point. Valerie's jaw tightened. Actually, Hoda, I absolutely can pick and choose. Authenticity doesn't mean I owe anyone unlimited access to my private pain. It means I'm honest when I do share, but I'm allowed to have boundaries. Everyone is. The audience began to murmur. Some were nodding in agreement with Valerie. Others seemed uncomfortable with the tension. Hoda glanced at the audience, perhaps sensing she was losing the room, and shifted tactics. I'm not trying to upset you, Valerie. I'm just saying that when you talk about your struggles publicly, you're helping people. Don't you want to help people today? It was a manipulation, subtle but clear, framing Valerie's boundaries as selfishness, as a refusal to help others. Valerie saw right through it. Helping people doesn't require me to sacrifice my own well-being. I can help people by modeling healthy boundaries. That's actually more valuable than forcing myself to have a conversation that doesn't feel right to me. Jenna jumped in again, her voice more forceful this time. Valerie, you are absolutely right. We should move on. Let's talk about the cookbook. She shot a look at Hoda that was impossible to miss, a clear signal to drop it. But Hoda, whether from ego or genuine confusion about why Valerie was upset, continued. I just think it's interesting that you're suddenly so private when you've written entire books about your life. You've done countless interviews about your relationships, your body image struggles, your journey. So I'm confused about where the line is for you. Valerie's response was measured, each word chosen carefully. The line is wherever I say it is, Hoda, and it can change. I might be comfortable discussing something in a book I spent months writing and editing, where I had complete control, but not comfortable discussing it in a live interview where I don't know where the questions are going. That's my right. Hoda sat back, and for a moment she looked genuinely taken aback. I feel like I'm being made out to be the bad guy here, and that's not fair. I'm doing my job. I'm asking questions that I think the audience wants answered. Valerie shook her head slowly. Your job as an interviewer includes making your guests feel respected. It includes listening when someone is uncomfortable. I've told you multiple times now that I don't want to go down this road, and you keep pushing. That's not journalism, Hoda. That's pressure. The word pressure seemed to hit Hoda hard. Her face flushed slightly, and her voice took on a defensive edge. I have never pressured anyone. I'm one of the most empathetic interviewers in this business. Everyone says so. Valerie's eyebrows raised slightly. Then maybe listen to what I'm telling you right now, instead of defending your reputation. Jenna was visibly distressed at this point, caught between her co-host and her guest. She tried once more to mediate. Ladies, I think we're all coming from a good place here. Maybe we just got our wires crossed about what today's conversation was going to be about. Valerie, I'm so sorry if there was any confusion. Valerie turned to Jenna, and her expression softened. Jenna, you have nothing to apologize for. You've been gracious throughout this. But I was told this was going to be a light, fun conversation about cooking and maybe some general wellness topics. I wasn't prepared for what this turned into. Hoda interjected again, apparently unable to let Valerie have the last word. And I was told you were open to discussing your journey. Your publicist approved the topic list. So maybe the confusion is on your end. That statement would later be disputed by Valerie's team, who released a statement saying that the approved topics had been general and that specific questions about past relationships and weight loss numbers had not been cleared. But in the moment, Valerie didn't have that information at her fingertips to counter with. What she did have was her own sense of what felt right and wrong. Even if every topic was approved, Hoda, I'm allowed to change my mind in the moment. Consent isn't a contract. If something doesn't feel good, I can say stop. That's basic respect. Hoda's response revealed the core of her misunderstanding. But this isn't about consent, Valerie. This is about an interview. Those are two different things. Valerie stared at her. The silence stretched for several seconds. When Valerie spoke again, her voice was quiet but clear. No, Hoda, they're not different things. Consent applies to all interactions. Just because this is television doesn't mean I stop being a person with the right to decide what I'm comfortable with. It was a profound moment, one that resonated far beyond the immediate situation. Viewers at home were split. Some felt Valerie was being difficult, that she should have just answered the questions or declined the interview altogether if she wasn't prepared to discuss her life. Others saw it as a masterclass in boundary setting, a woman refusing to be bulldozed even in front of millions of people. Hoda made one final attempt. Valerie, I really think you're overreacting. These are normal interview questions. If you can't handle normal questions, maybe morning television isn't the right place for you. That was it. That was the comment that sealed the deal. Valerie's face went from hurt to resolved in an instant. She stood up, and the movement was so sudden that both Jenna and Hoda startled slightly. Valerie removed her microphone with steady hands, her movements deliberate and calm. Jenna, thank you for having me. I'm sorry this didn't work out the way we all hoped. Then she turned to Hoda. I'm not overreacting. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. I hope someday you understand that. And with those words, she walked off the set. The camera captured Jenna's face as Valerie left. She looked devastated. She turned to Hoda, and though there was no audio, her expression said everything. Hoda's face was harder to read, a mixture of defensiveness and perhaps the first glimmers of realization that she had badly mishandled the situation. As Valerie walked past the cameras and toward the exit, crew members looked on in shock. This wasn't something that happened on morning television. Guests didn't just leave. They endured awkward interviews. They laughed off uncomfortable questions. They pushed through. But Valerie had decided that her dignity was worth more than the appearance of being a good sport. The show cut to commercial immediately, and when it returned, the energy was completely deflated. Jenna addressed the audience with visible emotion, acknowledging that sometimes conversations don't go as planned and that respect for guests is paramount. She didn't explicitly apologize on Hoda's behalf, but the implication was clear. Hoda did not return for the rest of the show. The immediate aftermath of Valerie's exit played out in real time on social media. But what's often overlooked is the deeper significance of the exchange itself and what it revealed about the ongoing tension between public figures and the media that covers them. The dialogue between Valerie and Hoda wasn't just a disagreement. It was a microcosm of a much larger conversation about respect, boundaries, and the cost of fame. What made the situation particularly striking was how Valerie handled herself throughout. She never raised her voice. She never resorted to insults or personal attacks. She simply stood her ground, repeatedly and clearly, about what she was and wasn't willing to discuss. The fact that this still wasn't enough, that Hoda continued to push even after multiple redirects, spoke volumes about the expectations placed on guests, particularly female guests, in these settings. The conversation also highlighted a troubling double standard. Male celebrities are rarely pushed to discuss their weight, their relationship failures, or their emotional vulnerabilities in the same way women are. When they do discuss these things, it's treated as groundbreaking vulnerability. When women discuss them, it becomes fair game for endless interrogation. Valerie had been open about her struggles, yes, but that openness was being weaponized against her, used as justification for boundary violations. Consider the specific questions Hoda asked. She wanted numbers, dress sizes, pounds lost, specific timelines. She wanted Valerie to quantify her worth in terms of her physical transformation. Even when Valerie tried to shift the conversation to health and wellness rather than aesthetics, Hoda pulled it back to the numbers. The message was clear. Your value is in your before and after, not in your actual well-being. What Hoda seemed to fundamentally misunderstand was the difference between voluntary disclosure and coerced disclosure. Valerie had chosen to write about her experiences in her books. She had control over the narrative, the timing, the framing. In a live interview, she had none of that control. She was being asked to perform her trauma in real time, without the protection of editing or the ability to walk back something that didn't come out right. The comment about Valerie not being able to pick and choose when to be authentic was particularly revealing. It suggested that authenticity is an all-or-nothing proposition, that once you've shared something, you've forfeited the right to privacy forever. But that's not how human beings work. We share different parts of ourselves in different contexts with different people. The fact that Valerie had been open in some spaces didn't obligate her to be open in all spaces. The manipulation tactic of framing Valerie's boundaries as a refusal to help people was particularly insidious. It played into the expectation that women, especially women in the public eye, should be self-sacrificing, that their pain should be available for consumption if it might benefit someone else. But Valerie's point was crucial. Modeling healthy boundaries is helping people. Showing that it's okay to say no, even on television, even when you're being pressured, that's a valuable lesson. When Hoda said that consent and interviews are two different things, she exposed a mindset that's pervasive in media. The idea that professional contexts somehow exist outside the normal rules of human interaction. But Valerie was right to push back on that. Consent does apply to all interactions. The fact that cameras are rolling doesn't suspend someone's right to decide what they're comfortable with. The comment about Valerie overreacting and suggesting that maybe morning television isn't the right place for her if she can't handle normal questions was particularly galling. It was dismissive, condescending, and it completely missed the point. The questions weren't normal, they were invasive. And even if they were normal, that doesn't make them appropriate. What Valerie demonstrated in walking off that set was something powerful. She showed that you can be polite, you can be professional, and you can still refuse to participate in something that doesn't serve you. She didn't owe anyone her pain. She didn't owe anyone her trauma. She didn't owe anyone an explanation beyond the one she'd already given multiple times. The ripple effects of this incident extend far beyond one awkward morning show segment. It raises questions about how we prepare guests for interviews, about what topics are actually agreed upon versus what gets asked in the moment, about the power dynamics between hosts and guests. Valerie's publicist later clarified that specific questions about weight loss numbers and past relationships had not been approved, which suggests that Hoda went rogue. For viewers, the incident was a Rorschach test. What you saw in it probably reflected your own experiences, with boundaries, with being pushed too far, with having your no dismissed or minimized. Those who have struggled to have their boundaries respected likely saw themselves in Valerie. Those who have never had to fight for that respect might have struggled to understand why she didn't just answer the questions. The incident also shines a light on the broader culture of morning television. These shows thrive on intimacy, on the illusion of friendship between hosts and guests. But that manufactured intimacy can be dangerous. It can lead hosts to believe they have more access than they actually do, It can lead audiences to feel entitled to information that isn't theirs to have. And it can leave guests in vulnerable positions where saying no feels like breaking an unspoken contract. Valerie's walk-off was a rejection of that contract. It was a statement that even if you invite me into your home through your television screen, I still get to decide what I share. Even if millions of people are watching, I'm still a person with rights and dignity. Even if you're Hoda Kotb, beloved television personality, you don't get to bulldoze me. The courage that took should not be understated. Walking off a live television show, knowing that it will be analyzed and debated, knowing that some people will call you difficult or dramatic, that takes guts. Valerie did it anyway, because the alternative, sitting there and allowing herself to be disrespected, was worse. Valerie Bertinelli walked off that set with her head held high, and in doing so, she walked towards something more important, her own self-respect. She showed that you can be gracious and firm, polite and unbending, kind and protective of yourself, all at the same time. Those aren't contradictions. They're the hallmarks of someone who knows their worth. The fact that this story resonates so deeply with so many people tells us something important. It tells us that a lot of us have been in situations where our boundaries were pushed, where we were made to feel like we were overreacting for wanting basic respect, where we wished we'd had the courage to walk away. Valerie did what many of us wish we could do, and for that, she deserves recognition. So what's the takeaway here? Maybe it's that boundaries matter. Maybe it's that consent isn't just about one context, it's about all contexts. Maybe it's that authenticity doesn't mean unlimited access. Or maybe it's simply this: when someone tells you they're uncomfortable, believe them and respect them. If you found this story as compelling as I did, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. I want to know, do you think Valerie was right to walk off? Or should she have stayed and finished the interview? Let me know your thoughts.